welcome to this episode of the Martial Truth Podcast, my interview with Byron Jacobs. Byron Jacobs is a long-time practitioner of martial arts, especially Xingyi and Bagua. He lives in Beijing, China, and he's the author of this book, which you can't see because it's on my Kindle, right? My iPad, my very large iPad. But it's Dragon Body, Tiger Spirit, a translation and explanation of the classic text of Xingyi Quan with Byron Jacobs. And I'm sure I butchered the pronunciation, but that's okay. Great book. Highly recommend it. It's another example of where he's translating texts which apply to everything. The principles that are there. You know, again, as we discussed in the interview, it's not a book you read cover to cover. You read a part, you put it down, you go back, you read it again. Excellent. Like a Bubishi, like a Go-Rin no Show. This is the type of books. It's just one of the classics, all right? So if you're doing karate, there's a lot there for you too. I highly recommend my karate brethren purchase the book. Look at the principles that are being talked about there. Apply to everything. They're universal. I mean, I see a lot of the same things are in Tai Chi. Some of the stuff is exactly what's in Tai Chi. So really, really enjoy it. He's done a great job, and we all know how difficult it is to translate these ancient texts. And, you know, it's just difficult. It's mind-numbingly difficult, all right? So I hope you enjoy it. We talk about a bunch of different things, that's it. So as usual, if you enjoy the podcast, please click that like, share, subscribe button. Consider becoming a monthly member. In the next few weeks, I'm going to be doing the first live class for the paid monthly members. It looks like it's going to be Ishinryu Karate, and it's going to look like it's going to be on body mechanics, all right? That's what people seem to want me to do. So that'll be the first class, and then as we move forward, I'll do things in other martial arts, other subjects, that we move on. And this will be for the members, the ones that are paying that $2.99 a month to get extra stuff on the channel, all right? And that'll be a live class, and I'll do that via YouTube, and I'll do it probably on a Saturday or Sunday, late afternoon, early evening, all right? So please enjoy my interview with Byron Jacobs. All right, so Byron Jacobs, welcome to the Martial Truth Podcast. So Byron Jacobs is the author of Dragon Bodies, Tiger Spirit, the classical text of, I'm going to mispronounce it. Go ahead, you say it.
Xingyi Quan.
Xingyi Quan, right? Excellent. Highly recommended. People should read it. Karate guys should read it. It's great. The principles that are talked about are consistent through virtually every martial art. So Byron, why don't you talk about yourself a little bit? Give us a little bit about your background, how the book came about.
Okay. No. Well, thanks for having me. I mean, it's interesting that you, coming from your background, actually sought out to read the book, and then you found that you had similar principles that were echoing things you had practiced, and that's probably, I'll get into my background in a second, but I just wanted to preface this by saying that, you know, I think martial arts are all of us trying to get a different perspective on the same thing, and we're all kind of looking at it from different angles, but they should echo one another. The human body is 2 arms, 2 legs, and we all work on this plane that is working under physics and gravity. So
one of the things I say all the time, one of the big problems I think with modern martial artists is they see something and right away they want to go, oh, we don't do it like that.
Yeah.
Instead of taking a step back and saying, let's see the common threads that go through everything. Let's figure that out. That's what I try to do. That's why, you know, sometimes I don't understand that thinking. I think it's because of a lot of times it's the style thing. Well, my Coke is better than your Pepsi. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's also a lot of people kind of, they might feel a little bit defensive because they're worried that if something that they're doing is different to something else, then is it inferior or is it superior? And if it has to be superior, otherwise they feel like they've wasted their time.
Right.
But there's no waste of time with martial arts. Like you're either improving or you're learning. So it really doesn't matter. So
well, you know, like I say, I was a police officer for 22 years. Okay. So unfortunately, fortunately, however you want to look at it, I had to use my martial arts for real a lot. And if a karate punch works and drops a guy, and a Xingyi punch works and drops a guy, and the delivery systems are a little bit different, but they both work. Okay. And, one of the things I say too is is there's so many people in the world. There's plenty of students for all of us. Like I don't think we should be knocking each other. Like let's, why not experience other things? But
Sure, sure. No, that's true. That's exactly. I'll give you a little bit about my background. I was
sure.
born in South Africa.
Okay.
So I grew up there for most of my life, but I left for periods in between. I moved to Brazil when I was about 6. I was there for a couple of years. I was in the States for a few years after that, and then I was back in South Africa. I'd always been interested in martial arts, like from the second I saw a Chuck Norris and a Bruce Lee movie as a kid. So my mom was like, all right, this kid's crazy about martial arts. So I actually started with Japanese.
Okay.
I started with judo.
Okay.
Judo, and I did a bit of karate when I was young, shukokai.
Okay.
My uncle actually was a teacher, so I was learning a little bit from him. But, throughout my life, wherever we went, I was always like, I want to do martial arts. I want to do martial arts. But it was Bruce Lee that really inspired me as a kid. So I was always trying to get back to Chinese martial arts. That was always the goal. I just didn't know what it was. I
Right.
didn't know that's Chinese martial arts and I'm doing judo and karate. That's Japanese martial arts. But as I got older, I started to have more access to Chinese martial arts, and I started to do that. When I was young, I also did some competitive Chinese Wushu, which
Okay.
is a little bit more acrobatic. It's actually more of
Right.
I would say an expression of Chinese martial arts, but with a gymnastic goal and competition goal. I was lucky because the people I learned from initially were like first generation.
Okay.
So the first generation of that sport, they still had a lot of traditional content as their basics, and the competition rules back there were still more focused on specific content. It changed now. It's gone really far
Well,
off into.
it's incredibly athletic. I mean, look,
Also,
I give him credit. I mean, I'm 62. Like, there's no way. Like, I do practice a series of wushu kicks to keep my legs flexible, but I'm not doing them like they are. I mean,
no, no, for
it's
sure.
amazing the flexibility and the athleticism they exhibit.
Well, that's one thing they got right to a degree with their warm-ups. Their warm-ups are pretty good for whole body conditioning, flexibility, and that. But people kind of get stuck. I like it when people are constantly trying to say, "Oh, these front stretch kicks and these outside kicks and these inside kicks. This is how you use them." Like, no, they're to mobilize your hips.
Right.
No, they're not supposed to be used like that. It's just
Right.
a mat. It's like the extreme of stretching and mobilization of your
Right.
hips. So don't get confused. There's aspects of strength and focus and whatever, but the kicks are going to be different. Yeah?
Right.
But anyway, so I did that, but there was always like something in me that was drawing me to Xingyi Quan. I'd always been interested in Xingyi Quan. So over the years, I started seeking to study Xingyi Quan, and it was more by fate and by luck that I started training with my teacher, who's Di Guoyong. Di Guoyong is a very well-known Xingyi teacher. He's quite senior now in terms of age. He's almost 80. But back then, obviously, he was much younger, and he was well known in China simply because of firstly his background, and then secondly he was one of he had two main teachers. His main teacher when he was young was Zhao Zhong. Zhao Zhong was his Xingyi teacher and his first Chinese martial arts teacher in general. And he had been training with him since he was a child. And then later on in life, he wanted to do Bagua. So I started training with Li Ziming. Now, Li Ziming was the last third generation Bagua practitioner alive at the time. So, when he passed away, that was the end of the third generation. If you understand how close that is, the founder is first generation.
Right. Right.
And then Liang Zhenpu was his student, and Li Ziming studied with Liang Zhenpu. So a lot of the times when people hear my generation in Bagua, which is fifth, they're like, "Oh, you're the same generation as our grand teacher." It's just simply because Li Ziming was
Right.
third generation. My
Right.
teacher was fourth. But so he was well known because he was one of his 8 original disciples. So, my teacher's also, he's got a very, very deep Chinese martial arts background. But nonetheless, I found him purely by fate. I found one of his DVDs that was being sold. They produced a series of DVDs, must be over 20 years ago now. Instructional DVDs. I was looking at the 5 elements. I was like, oh, he's got a very clear and logical teaching method. So I wanted to find him. And a lady in Canada, Andrea Falk, had translated his Chinese language Xingyi books into English. So I contacted her. I said, I'm trying to find Di Guoyong. I don't know if there's any way you could help me get in contact. And she gave me his contact details. So that's where it started. And I was in Beijing. My wife is from China. She's from Beijing as well. So She lived in Beijing. She's originally from Inner Mongolia, but so I'd go back quite often. I was going to China since 2002, even for training. Before I started doing Xingyi, I was training in China. So that I got in contact with Di Guoyong and started training with him. Initially, I wasn't living in Beijing full time, but I was there a couple of times a year. So, and then after training with him for a little bit of time, I was like, no, I've got to move here if I really want to learn, deeper with him. You need to spend a lot of time very regularly, and that's what I did. So, I moved to China permanently. I want to say it's been 16 years now, roughly,
Okay.
that I was there. So I moved then, and it was like 2010, around there, that I moved there permanently. And then I got very close with my teacher. I was almost with him every day. I'd go through every single day, and it was really a golden time to train with him, because even though he was was like in his 50s, it's actually a really good time to train with him.
That's the prime.
Yeah.
I find with senior martial artists that between 45 and probably 60 are like one of the times with their physical prime. Even now, you could probably extend it because people are more healthy in general, living longer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and even today, I mean, he's physically much older. He's older, but he's still quite. He
right,
impresses me sometimes. I'm like,
right,
wow. I mean, you're almost 80 and you're doing this stuff. So,
right.
but yeah, so I spent a lot of time with him, and that I was primarily learning Xingyi Quan. That was my interest. But after some years, he's like, you should learn our Liang style Bagua as well. And for me, I listen to my teacher. If he suggests it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to. And I also told him I want to learn in the same progression that you learned. You did Xingyi first, so definitely I want to get a very solid base in Xingyi Quan before I did Bagua. And I think that's a very important thing, to be honest, because Xingyi Quan is a style that develops what we call zhengti jie, or whole body power, very quickly compared to other styles. It's a much more direct approach to developing that attribute. From day one, you're trying to develop that attribute. But that attribute is quite common in what they classify as Chinese internal styles. So
Right.
the big three would be Xingyi, Bagua, and Taiji.
Right.
So that translates to what you'd actually want to apply. The expression and the tactics and the techniques might be different in the other styles, but that whole body motion is there.
Well, it's interesting because, like told you, I'm a longtime practitioner of Chen style Tai Chi Chuan, and one of the things I see in the States lacking with the Tai Chi is the power.
Okay.
I just see like where Chen Jianghua's approach is, there's power. Like we practice the form with speed and power. I mean, we also practice it slow and smooth, but we practice with Fa Jin. Where I had a couple of guys that taught Tai Chi that rented my space in New York, that I'd come down, I'd watch their class, and I'd never see anything with power. Like it was only slow, smooth, which looks very nice and everything. But I'm like, if this is a martial art, why is there never any? And that's one of the things I see lacking in specifically Tai Chi practiced in the States. Um, is that lack of practicing Fa Jin. And when reading your book and reading the descriptions of the fists, I see so many similarities to movements we have within the Yilu and Erlu in the Chen style Tai Chi. And, I know that, and you might want to expand on this. Xingyi is the oldest of the three
It
major
is.
internal arts. Bagua is the youngest. So,
Exactly.
and Chen Tai Chi falls in between.
Well, Chen Taiji doesn't have a short history. I
Oh
mean,
no, it's
if,
it's yeah. It's literally Xingyi's only I think maybe 50 or 60 years older according
well,
to
if you're gonna pull the ancestral art, it's
yeah,
older,
yeah,
but Taiji has got especially Chen style, which is the grandfather of
right,
Taiji,
right,
irrespective of the controversy and
right,
the marketing that people want to do
right,
today. The facts are the facts, and you know what? If you have experience and you look at Lao Jia Yilu
right,
and Lao Jia Erlu, and you map it onto the subsequent styles of Taiji, they're old classical form like 108 and
right, right,
Sun style. You can
right,
actually map it. You can map it to
right,
Chen style almost. I wouldn't say identically, but you can see, oh, the sequence is very, very close. So
right,
there is an ancestor to descendant relationship there. I don't want to argue about the semantics
Right,
and that is there,
right.
but yeah. So Xingyi is old, and that's why when you're saying that you read a lot of the in my book where I translated the classics, that you saw a lot of principles that were the same. A lot of the styles, including Xingyi, including Taiji, including Bagua, of course, being the youngest, when they were compiling their classics, they pulled from Xingyi classics, and that's why you'll see a lot of similar ideas. You might even see like talk of the six harmonies, etc. These were
Right,
well-established ideas,
right.
and other styles drew on them. Bagua is quite interesting because Bagua is like this eclectic northern art that had a base, but through its life, it also pulled the best parts from some other stuff it was
Okay.
exposed to. So you'll see little aspects of Xingyi's footwork, for example. You'll see aspects of certain parts of Taiji's circular method. You'll see it all in there. And then you'll also see uniquely Bagua stuff. Also, the different lineages and styles of Bagua focus on things differently. And the person who compiled those styles, his background influenced things very, very heavily. So Bagua, you mentioned that a lot of people don't have power, right? And my teacher was always adamant that like starting with Bagua is not a good idea because Bagua expects you to have a certain level of engine before you start learning its method.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't get this. They're like immediately, no, I want to start circle walking, but you don't have an engine. I mean, some people might pull it off, but in my experience, especially I had people that used to contact me. I made a website for my teacher after a couple of years, and then foreigners would contact me to come and train with him. And when they'd come, they'd be like, I want to learn Bagua. And my teacher would be like, do you have any martial arts background? They'd be like, no. Like, maybe you should start with Xingyi. Like, no, I want to do Bagua. And like, after years and years, you can see that there's that lack of whole body solid power. They've got the movement and they're going through the changes correctly, but that engine, that core engine is missing. So it's a very good thing to start with.
So it's interesting because my Chen Taiji master, Chen Zhanghua, my school was primarily karate school.
Right.
And when he first came to us, there were a lot of senior karate guys. It wasn't like, we had a lot of senior people. And one of the things he said to me is he feels it helps us because we understand the hard. Like we have a base in power.
Right.
And he said, so now he can teach us the soft because he says, but when guys only start in Tai Chi, he says sometimes they have a hard time understanding the generation of power. So it's similar to what your teacher's saying. And I just want to give you a little bit of what happened with my martial journey, how I was led to the Chinese arts. So I met a Goju sensei who was a big student of the Bubishi, right? And he was showing me things in karate. I'd never seen another karate sensei talk about these concepts. What I
Right.
realized later was he understood the concepts, but he couldn't do them with his body. So when I met
Right.
Chen Zhanghua and he walked in the dojo and he started demonstrating things, it was literally like, oh, that's what this karate master's been talking about. But this guy can do it with his body. So that's when I realized that, one of the things I say with karate too is karate is missing a lot of these principles. And there's various reasons for that. The direction of going in sport, World War II, they lost so many masters. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to see where those principles fit within my karate. And a lot of people now within my area of karate are very interested in that. Because again, you can't have an art that was called China hand originally
Yeah.
and not have any Chinese principles in it. Like, okay, doesn't make any sense. So that's why, so that's what happened with me. And then I started with Qigong in Japan, believe it or not.
Okay.
And then from there, like the Qigong teacher came to New York. He spent 10 days with us. And the last day he showed us some other stuff. I said, well, what's this? He goes, oh, it's Chen style. And then a guy was teaching Chen style in my school, renting the space, and he says, "Hey, I'd like to bring my teacher, and he's really good at fighting, but I don't have any students. Will you bring your karate guys?" And I said, "Sure." I was starting to explore it, the Chinese arts, and again, I was looking at it. I was starting to get a little older. I was looking at it from a health standpoint, right? Oh, Tai Chi's for health, Qigong's for health, right? This is all I hear, right? And then Shen Zhanghua walks in and it's like, oh, it's not just for health, it's for fighting. And I was like blown away by the fighting techniques, the applications. But again, most of what I had seen was I'd see a guy do one of these moves in a Chinese martial art and then never show an application, or the
Mm,
application wouldn't make sense. And Shen Zhanghua came in and everything made sense. And he explained that basically, if you do Tai Chi right, it's a martial art and it's also gives you high health. It'll keep you very healthy. So that's what attracted me to him, and that's what started attracting me to the Chinese arts. And I'm sure you've probably seen the same thing I have, where it's almost like um, some of it's for health, it's for health, it's for health. But one of the things I say is, if your body can't generate power, well, how healthy is your body?
right. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Well, I mean, I like to, and I've used this analogy a lot. Like, I like to think about classical martial arts, and I can't talk about the whole world's classical
Right.
martial arts, but
Right.
traditional martial arts for the most part, specifically my experience in the traditional styles I practice, they're like a hand, right? Like, they've got five fingers on them. One finger is, spiritual development. I don't want to
Right.
say it's religious, because it
Right.
isn't. People need
Right.
to understand, when we're saying spiritual, there's a
Right.
lot of meaning to it. There's
Right.
philosophical ideas,
Right.
there's ideas about character building,
Right.
blah, 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 understanding life's difficulties and things like that. Spiritual development. Chinese martial arts has cultural development and cultural aspects in it too. So that's another finger on the hand. Japanese martial arts have it too.
Same
We
stuff.
learn about Chinese philosophy and Chinese culture through
Right.
this. There's an entertainment finger. You
Right.
do it also because it's enjoyable. You're
Right.
not
It's
going to
fun.
keep doing it if it sucks.
Right. It's fun. Right.
Hard. Nobody said it's not hard. Nobody said it's not bitter. Didn't say you're going to have blood, sweat, and tears. But at the end of the day, you're like, wow, I feel really content doing
Right.
this, right? And then, as we go through these fingers, the fourth finger you could say is health.
Right.
It's got a health benefit. The thumb for me is always the martial aspect of it,
Right.
because a hand without a thumb, it's kind of useless, right? You might not focus on all of these other aspects, but you got to at least keep the martial aspect correct. That doesn't mean you have to go out and fight,
Right.
because the intent of a technique for us, especially with arts like Xingyi Quan and Bagua, intent is so important that once you've been taught the correct intent, which is a functional intent, it's about use, it's about body mechanics, it's about where you put your power, it's about when you're putting your power. For example, if my teacher tells me to do a specific one of the five fists, and instead of putting my intent here, we're supposed to put our intent here, it changes how your shoulders move. And then your focus there has other aspects, and everything changes. Your whole body starts to move in a way that's more unified and correct for that technique. So even if you're not focused on combat, those important aspects are taught, you understand, and you do the technique correctly. And then if you really want to develop the combat side of things, you definitely can. You've got everything there already. Um, so for me, health is a natural byproduct. It's and you cannot separate it. You can't say that Tai Chi is for health. Well, then what are you trying to say? Xingyi is for unhealthiness? What are you
Right.
like? What are we
Right.
saying?
Right.
You know?
Right. It makes no
So,
sense. It makes no sense.
so
But
they've
we
all
hear
got
we hear
that,
it all the
that
time
health
though.
and combat. Yeah,
Right. We hear
yeah,
it all the time though. I mean, even my Tai Chi master said, he goes, kind of like the health people hijacked it, and the new agey people have hijacked it, right? But he said there's only two ways to do Tai Chi, and you could apply it to any martial art. It's right and wrong. And if you do
yeah.
it right, you get all those benefits you just talked about. And if you're doing it wrong, well, then you're not getting all those benefits. And then
Exactly.
it's really an imitation of what it's supposed to be. You're not really into what the real thing is, you know.
Correct.
And like you, I think the real thing is important, and the real thing is hard. Like you said, like you are gonna taste that bitterness. If you are doing a real martial art and you are not sometimes walking away, shaking your head, aggravated, frustrated. Like I literally started teaching my seniors that you need to understand that the frustration is part of the training.
Right.
You're
Exactly.
struggling to get something. You're frustrated. You're frustrated. You're frustrated. Okay, you get it. Oh, I feel good. Okay, but now, all right, now you also have to do this. Now the frustration starts again. So I think that's part of it. And I think that's why I think a lot of modern people have a hard time studying the more real arts. Like these arts that are kind of, an imitation of the ancient arts that, you go there and it's all rah rah and everyone does great. But when you're doing a real art, I mean, as instructors, I'm sure you're the same way. You're constantly correcting.
Yeah.
It's never good enough. And it takes a certain, I think, type of personality to be able to handle that, you know?
We just, like if you're doing a sculpture and you start with a big piece of stone, you initially start with a hammer and a chisel.
Right.
And then after you move away from the hammer and a chisel, you start to use a big metal file. And then
Right.
after you finish with that, you start using sandpaper. So as you get more senior and advanced in the art, you don't stop refining the sculpture. Your sandpaper grit might become finer and finer, and you might be working on details that are so deep.
Right.
But the process of continually working on the sculpture is a forever process. You're never
Right.
going to finish. You
Right.
should always be refining. You
Right.
might be refining on the minutia a lot later, but you're refining, and that's an important thing.
Yeah, one of the things I tell my students is I'm trying to be better today than I was yesterday, and I'll try to be better tomorrow than I was today. And again,
Right.
like I'm sure you feel it too, when you're training a long time, in the beginning you had kind of jumps where all of a sudden, oh, I got
Yeah.
something. And like, okay, oh man, now that feels, but now, like, again, in my case, almost 50 years, the progress is much slower.
Yeah.
Like it's at a snail's pace. And some of
Yeah.
my senior guys are now beginning to realize that where they're not having those big jumps that they used to have. It's a slow process, but it's still a process. It's still always there where you're moving forward. So,
Yeah.
you know.
And you also mentioned about qigong, for example. For us, from a classical point of view, we don't separate it. Like we don't say now I'm practicing. We don't even use the word qigong. It's a more modern term. We use the term neigong,
Right.
which means internal practice. But you don't separate it and say, okay, when I'm doing Pitren, for example,
Right.
I'm not doing neigong. No, you are. There are specific neigong practices. The only difference for us is we have certain specific practices that we call neigong. The only reason that they're called neigong is that they're heavily focused on intent and breathing, but the
Okay.
technique and the movement you're doing are all to help the body mechanics that you're supposed to have with the art. So, but at all times, it's mind, body, and spirit. Like it just might be that one practice has more focus on more stress on that than the other, and then when you're doing, for example, the five fists, maybe it'll be a little bit more physical than
Right.
breath, for example. But it's always there, and
Right.
it's really important. And you also, I've also found, like you said, that you see people doing Tai Chi and it's always soft, right? But in Xingyi and even in Bagua, we do practice slowly too.
Right. Right.
It's a very important part of practicing. It's not always fast and hard.
Right.
You have to do it slow. That was almost a very common way to start going deeper into your practice, is to do it slow. But then you also got to do it fast, as you said.
So one of the things I say here in the States is the big mistake the karate guys make is they only do the forms fast. So they never check their lines of power. They never check their body mechanics. They're never checking their alignment because they only do it fast. And the mistake that I see a lot of the Tai Chi people make here in the States is they only do the form slow. So if
Right.
the karate guys would say, all right, let me take a step back here and go slow and check myself, I think that karate would improve dramatic. And they begin to understand, hey, we're doing some weird stuff with our body mechanics. We need to fix it. And I think if the Tai Chi people in the States would work with more power, I think they'd begin to understand how the body should move. Like a lot of my students in New York, I'm in Arizona now, but my school's still open in New York. They're in their 60s now, and some of them are in the mid to late 60s. And I'll use the women as an example that are doing Tai Chi with me like 20 years. Their ability to generate power, for them, it's a special feeling, like that feeling of being able to generate power, right? So yeah, I kind of understand that. It seems with all the internal arts that you have to practice it both ways, and I think all art should be done like that. I mean, I'll give you an example in Katori Shintaru, and you start Katori Shintaru, Sugino Sensei is slow down, do it slow. Even the partner work, okay, no, you're not attacking to target. You have to attack for the target. No, you're attacking for his sword. So you slow down, slow down. And then one time he came over to me and he said, Michael, I can always tell you to go faster. But the problem is if you start going fast right off the bat and these mistakes are so ingrained in you, then it's going to be very hard for me to get those mistakes out of you. So in the beginning, he refers to it as precision. I want everything to be precise.
Mm,
And then you speed it up. After you have achieved that precision, now can you maintain that precision when you're moving fast? And that's,
right.
I think you'll agree, that's probably the same exact thing we're trying to create in these internal arts. You're doing it slow to be precise. Check yourself. Is this right? Is my position right? Okay, now can you maintain that position when you're issuing power,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Well,
So,
that's exactly it. Like our mental ability to grasp and pay attention and clearly identify a technique when you're doing it fast. For the most part, the human mind, if you do it fast, will clearly see and identify the beginning and the end of the technique,
right,
and it misses everything in the middle.
right,
And it's that everything in the middle that you need to polish. So every single point on that path has to be perfect, and the only way you can perfect it is by laying that track slowly. So you'll lay it slowly as you go through it and feel every point, because you can feel when I'm
right,
here, why do I feel weak? What can
right,
I adjust to
right,
change it? What angle is off? Where's
right,
my elbow? Like, is
right,
my elbow here?
right.
Is it behind my fist? Okay, let's make sure it's behind my fist as it comes out at every point. And then right at the end, when you're issuing, that's just a culmination of all of that.
Right.
But people don't realize you actually miss all of that in the middle if you only do it fast.
Right.
And you don't understand how to release it if you're only doing it slow.
And one of the things I teach too is, and this is the problem I see with a lot of the karate people, is the mechanics are off, so they leak. The power leaks out their own body.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
the problem is like people say to me, well, how do I know if I'm leaking? I said, well, you hit a heavy bag, or in the case of Okinawa, you hit a makiwara. Even if you're leaking, it's going to feel like you're hitting it hard. And the time you're going to find out if you're leaking is if, again, you have to engage in a real struggle, a real combat situation. And that's not where you want to find out if you're leaking power, because that's
Mm,
where you hit the guy and the guy stands there and looks at you. So they said, well, how do you? I said, well, you have to have someone that understands the body mechanics and the alignment to show you how not to leak.
correct.
So yeah, like when you're doing that, I'm thinking the same thing from the Erlu in the cannon fist. We do the exact same. But that's why when I'm reading the book, I'm like, oh, that's exactly how Chen Jianghua told me how to do those punches. Like I'm reading the poem and I'm reading your analysis, right? Let's talk about the book a little bit because I want to ask you a question because Chen Jianghua translated Hung Jung Shen's book,
Okay.
and Chen Jianghua is a high school teacher. So, and he said to me, he thought his brain was going to melt. And the reason he said it was because it's again, Hung Jung Shen writes it in poem form. He said, so Michael, I have to translate it. If I translate it literally, it makes absolutely no sense. Like you'll read it and you'll be like, that's gibberish. I have to translate it where I'm trying to get into Master Hung's head and explain it in the way that I heard him explain it to me when he talked about these things. So you guys, it makes sense to you. So did you feel that that was difficult for you too? Because obviously
Yeah,
you speak Chinese, right?
yeah, yeah. I
Okay,
speak Mandarin.
right. So
My teacher doesn't speak English, so you're not gonna
right,
have a good time if
right,
you don't understand. Yeah, actually, he teaches in such a way that almost anybody could physically get. But if you
right,
want to get the deep things,
right.
you be able to communicate with him. I didn't actually start writing this stuff as a goal to write a book. It
Okay,
was me writing notes
for
from my
yourself.
teacher, him giving me and explaining classical things, and me trying to write down and understand it and just keep my own notes. And then every day I'd think about the same poem, go back sometimes. Oh, I'd have an epiphany through training, and like, so it was more than 10 years that I had notebooks that I was just keeping for this stuff. And there are some books out there where they have the Xingyi classics in them, but a lot of them are literal translations, which just
Okay,
doesn't make any sense. And the other thing is there's no explanation. The
right,
explanation is really important because Chinese is an interesting language. Sometimes one word can, if I want to tell you in English what that word is, it's like 5 lines. It's not
right,
in it, but in Chinese, in martial arts, like
right,
not every Chinese person will understand, but in martial arts, people will understand that one word's intent and meaning. So my goal was to translate as close as possible, but then explain. You know, translate as close as possible in that I get the message across, not word for word translation. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So, and then explain. That's why you see a poem of 3 lines, and then I've got 2 pages of commentary on it.
Right.
So that's the only way. And that's what. And your teacher said his brain was almost melting. I mean, there were times when I was looking at these things and going back, and I was just never happy with what I was
Right.
writing, and going back and fixing, and then coming back to it like, no, but there's still something missing that needs to be told here. So it took a long time. And I mean, my Kung Fu brother, who lives in Beijing as well, his name is Gerard. Actually, he's also a black belt in karate. He comes from a
Okay.
karate background. I think mostly a Shotokan
Okay.
background. And he's been training with my teacher for some years as well. And I had him proofread, and he was like, at the end of it, his brain was like,
Right.
So
Right.
it's
That's
hard, and that's why the book shouldn't be read cover to cover. It's not
right.
that kind of book. It should be
Yeah.
read in pieces and
Yeah.
digested and
I
come back.
read a section, I put it down, I go back to it, I read it. And there's a lot of books. Like I said, I'm a big fan. I'm a bigger fan of these types of books than the so-called how-to books in
Yeah.
terms of martial arts. Because again, one of the things Chen Jianghua taught me, I asked him to translate. We have in the Bubishi called the 8 Poems of the Fist, the Kempo
Okay.
Gokuen. So I asked him to translate it and give me a brief explanation. And his explanation was very brief. And he said to me, he says, Michael, your job is to read it and then figure it out. And he says the ancients wrote it in a lot of ways. They write a line and you read the line. And the first time you read the line, you go, okay, well, what's that? Right. And he goes, no, you got to go back and read the line again. And you've got to let that line percolate in your brain until you're like, oh, like for instance, in the Bubishi, we have the eye must see all sides. Now, combat wise, it's very easy. I can see here, I can see here. If I turn my head now, I can see behind me. So very simple. But maybe it also means we need to see all sides of things. Like I need to see your side of something, you need to see my side. So you start to you let that percolate in your head and you start to have a deeper understanding. And I think that's what's great about translating these texts. And that's why I really enjoy reading those. Like I'll give you another one, The Go Rin no Show by Musashi. So
Yeah,
you
I love
talk
that book, actually.
Okay, so you talk about this book about the shoulder strike.
Yeah.
Now, we also have that in karate, but most modern people don't do it. But Musashi talks about it where he talks about it too, where he specifically says if it's done right, you can kill a man. Like
Right.
the power's there, right? So again, like in swordsmanship, I have a vast background in Japanese sword. But when I first read that, I was like, wow, I've never seen that technique within any of the classical Ryu, right? But again, here's a guy who's engaged in an
Life or death duels.
oh my God, right? So he's figuring stuff out. And I get it because I've been in a lot of actual combat and I understand. Like I tell people all the time, I was shown to do certain techniques a certain way, didn't work. I knew it wasn't the technique. I knew it was the way I was taught the technique. So I went back into that dojo. I got a couple of my harder guys and I figured it out. And I was like,
Mm.
okay. And I went in the future, when I did those techniques for real, and usually involving a joint lock, it would work. So I just find it fascinating that, again, you see the common threads, right? So here's a guy in Japan who's engaged in these life and death struggles. And I believe like Xingyi, Bagua, Taiji, they were protecting the caravans, right?
Yeah. Well, Xingyi is a lot of bodyguard and
Right,
escorting agencies
right.
where
So again, if it didn't work,
you
they
won't
wouldn't be
see it.
they wouldn't be here, right? I
Well,
mean,
like Xingyi became famous in the north of China not by chance,
right, right.
by reputation.
Right.
So
So that's one of the keys, I think. And again, when these guys put these principles down in writing, I think it's great. So I think the book's great. I mean, I'm hoping some of karate guys that watch this will invest in the book and really read it and think about how it applies to some of the things we do.
well,
Um,
I'm glad to hear that.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
really
I mean,
glad.
I think you did a great job. And anything else in the future you're thinking about doing?
Well, I actually earlier this year, I released a translate, but this was a translation of something my teacher's been writing. He's been writing on Bagua, on our style of Bagua,
Okay.
but it's not principles, it's not poems, it's actually a how-to.
Okay.
So I translated. I mean, again, he writes a lot. My teacher,
Okay.
I got the habit of writing from him
Okay.
because the first time I went to training with him, he looked at me, he's like, okay. where's your notebook? And I was
Right.
like, well, I'm here to train. He's like, yeah, so where's your notebook?
Right.
Like, I brought an extra t-shirt and a towel and a water bottle. It's like, bring a notebook next time. And then every time he taught me something, he'd be like, do you understand that principle? You got it? Go write it down. So I'm like, no, I'll write it down after. He's like, no, go write it down now. You'll forget. Your brain forgets, your pen remembers. Go write it down. So I started to get this habit from him. And every time, not only he'd teach me something, but something would click while I'm training, I'd go write it down. Go write it down. My teacher he's written so much over the years that he just never released. He's never published.
Okay.
And one of them was he was writing about Bagua and trying to organize the system that he learned. Like a lot of the older generations, his teacher wasn't so organized in his teaching. So my teacher was like, let me start organizing it. So I thought, let me start translating that. So I did release the first volume, and it's like I'm trying to split it up because
So is that available on Amazon too?
It is.
Okay, I'll pick it up. I'll definitely pick it up.
But that's a how-to.
It doesn't matter.
There are principles and history in there. So
yeah,
but and it's something different. For me, what was interesting. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like, a guy just came out with dog style boxing, a book on dog style boxing. So again, I don't know anything about that. So my thing is, I read the book. If I get one thing out of it, I'm happy. Like I went to a seminar last 2 weekends ago in a style of Okinawan Kobudo that's obscure. I'd never done anything before. And, I went there. A friend of mine was teaching it. I flew into Virginia, right? And it was great. They have a different approach to certain things. So I'm not saying that I'm going to train in that art, but it's that experience of, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, so, you get good perspective. Sometimes it sheds a light on something you're doing.
Yeah, 100%, sure. So, sure. And again, if the work is quality, you know what I'm saying? Like that's one of the keys. If there's a good amount of effort put into the work, when I saw your book, I grabbed it right away. I mean, it was the first time it popped up on my feed. I was like, wait a second, this is the classical text of Xingyi. I got to check this out. And I was really pleasantly surprised when I got it. I mean, it was really good. And like I said, I'll definitely pick up the Bagua book too, because again, I'm very well versed in the Okinawan arts, the Japanese Koru, because I spent a lot of my, Chen Taiji now it's over 25 years, so I'm doing it a fairly long time. But the other Chinese arts, I don't have as much an understanding of. Even to understand the background, I think is a good thing to understand in these different, these different arts. Especially because
I've interacted with dog boxers. Now that you mention it, when I was in Fujian,
okay,
I was down there visiting. I was there for a martial arts thing, so they got some of the old teachers. They did some performance demonstration of dog style, and some of their students, and I interacted with them a little bit. It's interesting.
It is.
It's a lot of groundwork.
Right.
Right. But yeah, it's quite interesting. So
yeah. Well, it's I say all the time, like, you look at an art like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and they're great. The groundwork's great, right? But nobody's inventing. None of us are inventing anything.
Exactly. You're just refining and using different environments that you're using it in. So
I mean, look, the one thing human beings are good at is figuring out lots of ways to kill each other, sadly. But we're very good at that, right?
Sometimes by necessity, unfortunately.
Well, yes.
Sometimes there was no choice.
Well, again, my line of work, one of the principles in the style of jiu-jitsu I do is even if someone offends you by violent deeds and words, you must endure it to have an everlasting peace. So when my teacher's mother, who was in her 70s, asked me to explain all, and when I got to that one, I explained it, and she goes, "Oh, yes, you understand it." And I said, "Yes, but I can't follow it." And she was like taken aback. And I said, "I'm a police officer. If someone does a violent deed, I have to go stop that." Oh, she goes, "It's exempt for military and police because you are the protectors of society." So, so it's a little, again, that different perspective on stuff, but listen, this has been great. I appreciate you coming on.
Well, I had a good time talking to you.
Yeah. So. And listen, future books, come out, reach out. I'll have you on again. Maybe you sell some books. I mean, a couple of guys, every time I have one of the authors on, I always get messages. Stop having authors on. You're costing me a lot of money.
Really?
Because they buy the books. They buy the books, Like I've interviewed Patrick McCarthy numerous times. A bunch of, and the thing that when I started the podcast, it was just about me riffing on stuff, right? And then I said, "Oh, McCarthy Sensei's coming out with a book on Keon. Oh, why don't I interview him?" And we're friends for a long time, so he came on. It was great. And then I started interviewing authors, and they saw they were selling, got to promote their books, and then they were like saying to me, "Mike, you don't understand. We don't have a lot of places to promote our books. So you're doing a traditional podcast on traditional martial arts, so it's great. Keep doing it." So I want to help guys like you too, because I want more books. Like I'm being greedy. Like it's for me. I want these high quality books being written, so I have things to read and I can learn stuff. And this
Yeah,
is
books
great
for
for
me are like the biggest amount of money I spend. You can see behind me, and that's just a little bit. I mean, I've got
right. Yeah,
shelves and
yeah,
shelves, and
yeah.
then I ran out of shelves and cupboards full of books.
Yeah, I've got
So
I've got two big bookshelves here. I'm sitting in my dojo, right?
yeah,
And I have probably 30 or 40 books up top in crates. Those are ones I only, if I really need to look at something, these are the ones I use more. I have some on here. I've got a stack of them in my house because I'm constantly reading and checking them. So, yeah, I mean, I think if the book is well written, you can learn a lot. And I've said to a couple of the authors, I think from a Western perspective, we're in almost like a golden age because we always got these how-to books that were kind of now we're getting guys that are translating the classical texts. We're getting guys that are really doing serious deep research and writing really good biographies on famous martial artists that have a lot of info in them. So I'm happy because it puts me in contact with a guy like you. So also, if I have a question or something comes up, I have another source I can ask. And even the other authors sometimes, they know I know certain things. They'll reach out to me, and it's great. I'm so happy that all these books are coming out and this knowledge is getting out there. I think it's really good, and I'm hoping people take advantage of it. I really am. So,
well, now
so
you're going to cost me money with this because I didn't know Patrick McCarthy had something new out. So
oh, he's
I'll
got
have to
lots
look
of stuff. He redid the Motobu book, which
Okay.
has like 100 extra new pages in it. He found a book that Kion Chotoku actually wrote. Now that's my lineage in karate. So
Okay.
because I do Ishinru, so it's Kion, Tatsuo, Kichiro Shimabuku, and me, right? So that's excellent. And again, you see the types of techniques they're doing, the fighting techniques. It doesn't look like modern karate. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
much more dangerous, serious stuff. McCarthy's got a book coming out on Taira Shinken. That's coming out very soon. But there's a
Okay.
bunch of different things. So there's a lot of good stuff coming out. Yeah, so
Great.
it's great. I mean, and again, like Russ, Russ Smith?
Yeah.
So Russ Smith's done some translations where he's translated a couple of things, which I thought were done. Mark Wiley's got a new book coming out on the boxing style he studies. So
Great.
again, like I'm like a kid in a candy store. I'm like thrilled and Mark's going to come on again and talk about his book. And so I appreciate you coming on. I'm glad I was finally able to hook up with you, and hopefully we'll do this again in the future.
I look forward to it. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me on.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Take care.
You too.
Hope you enjoyed that interview with Byron Jacobs. Here's again the cover of his book. Highly recommend you get it. I will put a link to his books in the description. Okay, I just found out. I didn't know he had another book on Bagua. I'm going to be picking that one up myself. Very interesting to read the backgrounds of these other martial arts and see some things. Makes you think outside the box and some of the things you do. So I think it's a good idea to do that. For those of you that don't have a lot of experience with the internal arts, very good. I mean, so excellent books. Hopefully we'll get together more in the future as he does more projects and different things, and he'll get him to come back on the podcast. All right. Again, if you enjoyed it, click that like, share, subscribe button. Consider becoming a monthly member. All right. Chen Jianghua, my Tai Chi master, will be out here in Arizona the second week in February. Details to follow, but those of you that want to attend, plan on that. I'll be putting some stuff up on Facebook during the week. We'll get that information out there. All right. Again, appreciate all of you, and I'll see you in the next podcast. Take care.